and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another MLB The Show 24 franchise mode. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we are opening a new chapter in MLB The Show 24, and we are officially opening up our Kansas City Royals franchise. Now, before we begin, I just have one quick disclaimer because I feel that some of you guys may be wondering, is this going to be the end to the Pirates franchise? No, it is not. We are still going to be continuing the Pittsburgh Pirates franchise, and we are still going to be continuing the Knothole Gang franchise. For those of you guys that don't know, those are two ongoing franchises that we have going on in the channel at the time of this recording. So just to kind of clear the air, this doesn't mean that we are going to be taking anything away from the Pirates franchise nor the Knothole Gang franchise. I just felt like I wanted to include another franchise in this one. We had our NL franchise, we have our fantasy franchise, and now with this one, we're able to dabble into the American League a little bit. So that's kind of the idea behind it. I wanted to be able to touch base on a couple different fans for the year. Wanted to make sure that everybody is included, just like we try to in every episode of the Knothole Gang series, as well as the Pirates franchise. With that being said, though, ladies and gentlemen, like we said, we are going to be taking on the Kansas City Royals. Now, again, this is not going to be a fantasy draft. This is going to be the straight-up Kansas City Royals of 2024, obviously with our own twists along the way, as you guys will see as we explain things deeper into this franchise. And before we get into anything else, I do want to say, if you guys do enjoy today's video, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for more amazing content, because only you, that is right, only you can make a difference for today's channel, so your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, guys, right in front of you is going to be the rules and regulations of this franchise. Pretty cut and dry. We are leaving extra inning runner on because that is still a rule that is being implemented. DH hitter across the league, obviously. There is no forced trades. We are completely taking control of the budget. We do have CPU control on, or CPU trading on. I do want to have some engagements. Regardless if the trades are a little bit wonky at times, I still feel that it is fun for the franchise to have those trades, because as you guys know, if you guys have watched previous videos of mine for the franchises, you guys will know I try to keep these franchises as realistic as possible. Obviously, there are some things that a game just can't replicate. That is that. And a couple disclaimers before we get into this as well. I do have some of the games already recorded. I have some of the games that are already happening. So for the first couple episodes of this, things are going to be from before. You might notice the font isn't updated or anything like that. That is just because, again, these were recorded at the time around opening day, I would say. This roster does, however, unlike our Pirates franchise, this does have players like Michael Lorenzen, Jordan Montgomery, and J.D. Martinez, and Blake Snell. Some of those guys that signed at the very tip end of spring training, those guys are going to be on their respective teams. There might be a couple guys that are missed, but with the roster that I had, this is the best thing that we could do. So with that being said as well, talking about full control, we are going to be taking on all responsibilities of this Kansas City Royals. So we are going to be setting up the lineups, the injury management, the scouting, 40-man rosters, trades, free agency, signing contracts, you name it. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be utilizing it. Now, I know a lot of you guys like that stuff, so we are going to be trying to implement it as much as possible in this franchise. So if you guys don't like any of the moves, put it down in the comments below. I'm your guy to blame. Put the blame on me if you don't like what's happening in this series. But again, we're going to try to keep things as fresh and as fun as possible for everyone. And talk about fun, we're going to break down some of the better players on this roster, at least overall-wise. There are a couple guys that are not on this exact list that we're going to be getting into a little bit later in this video. Also, it's worth noting, this video might be a little bit longer. I typically try to leave the prologues a little bit longer so we can really cover as much detail as you guys need and I can provide in one episode. So that's kind of the whole goal of this one. This one is going to be the prologue. So if you're here for gameplay, this is not necessarily the episode for you. That's why I always mark these episodes 0 prologue, just because I want people to understand this is more the setup into this franchise. Episode 1 will have gameplay. Another thing that we're going to add, I did include in both the Knothole Gang and the Pirate franchises, we included some spring training games. This one, we are not including any gameplay of the spring training games. At the time of recording this, it is done with spring, and I'm wanting to to be honest with you, hop right into the MLB content. I'm not really looking to do spring training this franchise, so that is just something that I kind of wanted to talk about. Now, while we talk about some of the guys, it is obvious. We have players like Bobby Witt Jr., and one that isn't mentioned that everybody knows, Salvador Perez, obviously two cornerstone pieces of this team. Salvador Perez obviously is starting to digress and get a little bit older in his age, more as a DH role than he is a catcher. You guys will see how we utilize Salvi in this one as well. But there are a lot of fun names that are on this team this year. And as you look at it, there's a lot of guys that really weren't on this team last year. Not saying that he wasn't, but Cole Reagans is going to be a main staple of this franchise, I feel. The 80 overall, 26-year-old really showed a lot of promise last year with the Royals. This is going to be his first full season with the Kansas City Royals, if I do remember so. Also, it is worth noting that I am not the biggest Royals fan. I don't dislike the Royals. I don't love the Royals. So I think this is going to be a fun franchise. We're going to learn a lot about some of these guys together, and I'm not going to have as much knowledge as I would with the Pirates franchise. And it's kind of something that's a little more refreshing to me, not always seeing the same names and the same faces that I always continually keep up on. And talking about that, we have guys, we're going to skip over Seth Lugo right now. We'll talk about the pitchers in a second. Freddie Furman is going to be one of the main catchers. Obviously, again, Salvador Perez is on this team, but Freddie Fermin, however you want to pronounce it, he is a potential 28-year-old at 77 overall. This is a guy that I really do see maybe having a couple years in this Royals franchise as a main staple, a very key piece of this team. As well, the Royals add a player like Hunter Renfroe, the most outfield assists last year by any outfielder. I do believe you guys can check me on that one if you want to. Brady Singer is going to be what I am hoping to be a resurgence year for Brady Singer. Really hoping that Singer can turn things around and start singing his way into some high notes this season. Will Smith is also going to be a guy. The 34-year-old veteran is coming back to Kansas City. He is hoping to, what I'm going to imagine is kind of like a send-off retirement type thing with Will Smith. I'm going to try my best to keep him, but if I'm being honest, Will Smith has a lot of trade potential for whatever reason in this game. Michael Wacha as well, another guy recently signed. He's going to be around for a couple years. We'll talk about contracts and things like that in the future, but there are some big-name guys, and there are some veterans. This is a team that has a lot of youth, and they also have some of those veteran presences. Something I kind of like about this team. It has a good blend of players. It has a lot of potential to be a very strong team. Now, with that being said, taking a look at the starting pitchers and what is coming in possibly the future, we have Cole Reagans, Seth Lugo, Brady Singer, Michael Wacha as a set 4 in the rotation. Now, that 5 spot is definitely up to be interpreted. We have players like Kyle Wright, Daniel Lynch, Jordan Lyles, and Chris Bubic to start off this franchise as all potential guys that could fit into that 5th start. Do not gawk at Kyle Wright's 78 overall. I think that's a bit inflated even for how he performs in this game. Not trying to jump to conclusions, but Kyle Wright did have a very troublesome last year. We have seen a couple years ago that Kyle Wright has shown signs of being a very solid pitcher. Is he going to do that for Kansas City? We will have to see as we move things along. But again, players like Cole Reagans are an absolute certainty, an absolute must on this team. And I'm very excited to see what the 26-year-old can bring to the table. The Florida native is coming at things looking very strong, in my opinion, and I'm definitely hoping to see what he can do. Last season, he had a whip at 1.16 and an ERA at 3.47, while striking out 113 batters in that span over just 96 innings. He was also used as a bit of a reliever at times in between Texas and Kansas City, so that's just kind of something to note. He was able to grab 3 holds along the way. Also, very notable, In his 2022 season with the Rangers, he lit up 6 home runs, where in the 96 innings that he pitched across Texas and Kansas City, he only allowed 7. So definitely a good sign with Cole Reagans and a very promising start to what could be a very big-time career for the player. Also, taking a look at his contract real quick, it is very, very friendly as a contract that you want to be able to have a part of your team. Only $740,000 coming his way. He is going to be a big main staple in this franchise. Where we move things along, we're taking a look at Seth Lugo, the 79 overall 34-year-old veteran, having a first full season with the Kansas City Royals. Lugo definitely had signs of being a talented pitcher last year for the San Diego Padres, having a whip around that 1.2 spot and an ERA very similar to Cole Reagans at a 3.57. Although Lugo not really been known to be the biggest strikeout pitcher in his career, at last year sitting 146 and a third innings, only striking out 140 batters, nearly getting to that strikeout per inning marker, but it is not something that we are really too concerned with at the time. Now, talking about somebody that is a little more highly touted, in my opinion, Brady Singer, the 27-year-old, also Florida native. He is going to be a 77 overall to start this one. A potential pitcher, really hoping for big things out of Brady Singer. We really need to see a solid year because, as you guys seen before, it has not been the most solid of years out of Brady Singer, and we are definitely hoping that Singer can perform better as the years come along. And the next guy that we're going to be breaking into is Michael Wacha. Obviously, Michael Wacha making his first tenure here on the Kansas City Royals. Previously, also in San Diego, coming right along with Seth Lugo. Previously, also was in Boston in 2022, Tampa Bay in 21, and in 20 was a New York Met, and then St. Louis Cardinal in 2019. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a journeyman. And from the looks of it, it seems like with due time, Michael Wacha has been getting a little bit better every single season. Obviously, in 2019, not the greatest year. 2020, obviously, the COVID year, a little bit of a hiccup for him there, struggling to really find his spot in the New York Mets rotation. They only really gave him 7 games to start, though, in that one, so we can only chalk that up for what it is. 2021 had a okay year, the whip kind of high, ERA kind of high, not really his best year. Boston looked a lot more like what Michael Wacha that we know and love, and then following that, very, very decent season out of him in San Diego. So that is going to land Michael Wacha a couple years at least in this rotation, or at least so they say in the rotation. Taking a look at things now, we have Kyle Wright as the next pitcher. Kyle Wright, the 28-year-old. We are going to talk about him a little bit because he is going to be a Kansas City Royal. However, again, he's got to earn that spot in spring training. We're going to talk about how spring went and all the performances go. But Kyle Wright is a guy that does have a very high ceiling, high velocity, high break, at least in the attribute category. His fastball really averaging only about 95 miles an hour. He does have a good pitch mix. He has a slurve, sinker, fastball, curveball, or not curveball, circle change, and a slider. So a decent pitch mix from Kyle Wright. The only thing that isn't too decent about Kyle Wright is that 2023 season. Obviously coming back for some injuries that Kyle Wright has dealt with in the past. A guy that is very injury prone in the major leagues. Only played in 9 games, started 7 of them, and they were not 7 good starts, I can tell you that. In 31 innings, he had led up 40 hits in 24 earned runs in just 31 innings. That is a big no bueno no. So that one not looking too good. 5 home runs led up on 17 walks as well. Not very desirable at all. Strikeout numbers still there, punching out 34 guys, but the in-betweens were not looking too good for him. As Daniel Lynch is going to be the next guy that we talk about. Not really too much to talk about with Lynch right now at the moment. He's a high stamina guy, big lefty, standing at 6'6", 200 pounds. He's got some weight to him. The Virginia-born native is a big-time lefty that is a guy that we could be seeing in the future, or at least be talking about in the near future, where there are veterans right alongside him. However, in Jordan Lyles. Now, the thing with Jordan Lyles is that big-time contract that he just gave the Kansas City Royals. That contract is sitting at $8.5 million. So Jordan Lyles is going to have to really kind of make his mark, at least in my opinion, for that contract to really pay off. 8.5 for a 5-man in the rotation isn't really what we're shooting for. Now, given Kyle Wright's last year in Kansas City also was very undesirable. However, in Baltimore, Texas even, he looked okay. He was a guy that was at least able to go deep into games, or at least eat up some innings. I don't even want to say deep into games. He was able to eat up some innings for the Kansas City Royals, the Baltimore teams, things like that. So Jordan Lyles is definitely a guy to keep on our radar. But as we talk about radar, we have this guy right here in Kris Bubic. Kris Bubic is a guy that I at least am personally hoping he can kind of find a resurgence or have some type of table. He's a guy that I would like to see build it, but only a 3-pitch pitcher, fastball, changeup, curveball type of guy. Hits per 9, not really his most desirable thing as well, but he is at least one of the guys that's in the team that we can at least talk about and at least get ourselves a little bit excited about as the season comes along. We also are going to be talking about the relief pitchers. Now, I'm not going to be diving into these guys as in depth as we are in the pitching or the starting pitchers, but we do have guys like Will Smith, John Schreibner, Nick Anderson, Chris Stratton, Carlos Hernandez, Tyler Duffy, Josh Taylor to talk about a select couple. Now, some of the guys that I am pretty keen on in this franchise, as I mentioned before, Will Smith, big-time lefty, definitely like that aspect. Nick Anderson is a very, very strong pitcher. He has proven time in and time again that Nick Anderson can be a pretty solid pitcher. Now, we will talk about this momentarily, but the closing role is not a very strong role for this team. Carlos Hernandez, also another guy that is worth noting. However, taking a look at that closing role, you'll see Jake Brentz, James McArthur, and Will Klein all at the moment are on the Major League roster for spring training. Now, for me, I don't really see guys like Will Klein and James McArthur really making this Major League roster. I'll just be very open about that now. Jake Brentz does have a chance to make it. He is a lefty that we can at least utilize. I don't know if he'll be starting the season with us, but he is a guy that is at least worth talking about as the season comes along. And really, I would like to see some of these guys kind of shape up into some talented players. Now, talking about talented players, we have ourselves Freddie Fermin and Salvador Perez, as well as Austin Nola in the Major League roster. We are going to be talking about two of these guys right now, and the first one is Freddie Fermin. Freddie Fermin is a guy that really broke out onto the scene in a big way, and things looked very nice for Fermin. He had a very solid season. I believe he hit around 277. I did not get the screenshot capture for the MLB stats, unfortunately, but Freddie is a guy that I am very happy to see on the team. Very kind of like that shining bright in a dark tunnel, if you will, for this Kansas City team. Obviously, there is Bobby Witt, but there needs to be more star power than just Bobby Witt, and that is kind of another thing that we want to talk about with Salvador Perez. The thing with Perez, he has a very expensive contract, around $25 million, I do believe, and we have him for like 3 more years. So one, we want to preserve Perez. That is very important in this franchise. We do not want to stress and put strain on a already declining Salvador Perez. We're hoping to see some type of resurgence, hoping that he can make his way around in the big leagues, but that is going to be up to him. He is more than likely going to be the DH in this Kansas City's team. As we take a look at first base now in spring training, Vinny Pasquantino and Nick Pratto are going to be topping out the list there. As we take a look at Vinny Pasquantino right now, Pasquantino is a guy that I do eventually at some point potentially want to lock him up for a long contract because I do see a lot of potential in Vinny Pasquantino as well. The fielding isn't that desirable, but you don't really need that as a first baseman. You need to know how to react. You need to know how to block some baseballs, and I do believe that he does carry those potential attributes. As we take a look at his former stats in Kansas City, he has only played for Kansas City in basically what is not even been an entire full season, 133 games between two seasons. He has a career average of 272 and a career slugging of 444 if you compile the two together, hitting 19 home runs and carrying 60 walks on that one. He did have 27 doubles and 133 hits in 133 games, so he is averaging a hit a game, which is very nice. That is a nice thing to see. That's around, if he was just getting hits, around a 250 average. So it is something that you want to see in a player of Vinny Pasquantino's style. Now, moving things along, we do have Nick Pratto. Pratto, I'll be open yet again. I think Pratto has some work. This is a guy that I'm hoping to be a very solid bench bat or even a nice, decent power bat that we can implement as the season comes along. But there is a lot to work on with Nick Pratto. As we move things along, second base now is what we're going to be talking about. We got two guys, Adam Frazier and Michael Macy. Now, I will say this about Adam Frazier. I do not think that his tenure for this team is going to be very long. He is a utility guy. He is a guy that has done decent in the past. He has been an all-star with the Pittsburgh Pirates, but the seasons haven't really treated him well since that all-star season. After he broke out in that 2021 season, he has yet to replicate a season over even a 250 average. The slugging has not been over 400, and the on-base is barely hovering around that 300 marker. So Adam Frazier definitely on the decline. The 32-year-old, definitely we want to see him step things up. And it is also worth noting that we are paying him $4.5 million for this year. And the reason that I don't say that he's going to be hanging around too much longer is this guy right here. Michael Macy is definitely somebody that we are very keen on this season. Kansas City Royals fan or not, get used to liking Michael Macy in this franchise. He's a guy that I really want to put some time in. He is another guy that I really see high glimpses of in the future. In 2023, in just 129 games, he hit 15 home runs. He has a slugging potential. He does strike out a lot, and he hasn't walked a lot in the past. Those are the two glaring problems. He is very undisciplined as it stands right now. Now, in our control with this Kansas City Royals team, we're hoping to gain that discipline that he has been lacking. And I really think if he can find that discipline, this could be a guy that could be the everyday second baseman for many, many years of the Kansas City Royals. Now, talking about the future, talking about many, many years, holding things along, no, it's not Bobby Witt yet. It's Michael Garcia. This is the cousin of Alcides Escobar and the cousin of Ronald Acuna Jr. Michael Garcia has a super high ceiling for me. At only 24 years old, he sits at a 74 overall and a B potential. Taking a look at those attributes, he has an 87 contact against lefties, 62 contact against righties, 69 speed, that's nice, a 79 clutch, and an amazing defensive prowess, a 92 fielding, 74 arm, and 70 reaction. Michael Garcia is definitely a guy that we are liking on this roster. Last year, he did slash 272 with an on-base percentage of 323 and a slugging of 358. That is good enough for an OPS of 681, which might not sound like the greatest, but in 464 at-bats, he did knock 126 hits while tallying 20 doubles, 4 triples and 4 home runs while striking out 115 times. He also was able to swipe 23 bags. However, he was caught 7 times. So the guy isn't afraid to run the bases. He's not afraid to get caught. He's going to be somebody that can really kind of do it all. The power, again, is the one thing that lacks in Garcia. And if we can get a guy that's hitting around 280 and notching like 15 home runs a season, which is kind of something I'm hoping he can find this year, is a bit of that power. I'm really hoping that Michael Garcia can stay, because one thing that we didn't do this spring is lock him up. Now, he does have 2 years of a renewable contract that we can dive in. That $740,000 at the minimum is what we'll be paying him for those 3 years. However, we also have 3 more arbitration years as well. Now, clarifying this real quick, if you guys do notice my voice might sound a little bit more raspy, I am just getting over a little bit of a cold, so that is why that is that. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Yet again, though, we're talking about some big names, and they are all over the place. If you really do look at this Kansas City Royals team, there's a lot of young talent that really hasn't fully showed itself. However, Bobby Witt Jr. is kind of that outlier, because in Bobby Witt Jr.'s case, last year was kind of that breakout season for Bobby Witt, snagging 49 bases, hitting 30 home runs, while hitting a slugging just under 500 at 495, reaching on base at 319. That's a very nice number for Bobby Witt, slashing 276. He did strike out 121 times, but in 158 games, that's not too bad. He was able to grab 641 at-bats and compile that into 177 hits, so not too shy away from a 200-hit season. I definitely think it's possible if Bobby Witt can get it going early for us. That is something that we are definitely hoping to see from Bobby Witt, because we got Witt for a long time. I don't even think this one covers the tenure of that contract. We have him the whole way at least until 2033, where we are going to be paying him $26.3 million per year. Bobby Witt is going to be the franchise name for this team. Taking a step away from franchise names, we're talking about guys that I really want to see things get going, and that is going to be the man Garrett Hampson. He's going to be a guy that's going to be playing a little bit of everywhere. He is that utility man that we have on this team. He's going to be playing a lot of center field, as he's going to be platooning that with a player in Kyle Isbell, which we will be getting into in just a moment. But Hampson has that speed very similar to Bobby Witt Jr., where he's going to be flying over the bases this year. The Nevada-born shortstop primarily is going to find some time there, but between Bobby Witt Jr., guys like Michael Garcia, he's really going to be that platoon guy for days that those guys need off. That's really where you're going to see him at those primary roles that he played last year. And talking about guys that we want to see kind of show up and have a decent season, that is MJ Melendez, the 25-year-old, 67 overall, A potential, has a rocket arm, obviously a former catcher for this team. He can still catch, but he is primarily going to be playing a lot of left field, right field for us in the seasons. We're going to keep him at those corner positions. I don't really think I want to put him at catcher unless we absolutely have to. The only reason being, not that I don't believe he wouldn't be a good catcher. We have seen signs of Melendez being an okay catcher. I don't want to knock him too hard, but we have also seen times where Melendez has shown not so great catching characteristics. And to be honest, I want to see the bat kind of develop a little more. And it is hard for catchers, in my opinion, to develop that bat and stay being a good catcher. So Melendez, at this point, it does say secondary position catcher, but I do really think he's going to be more of a corner outfielder for us. He hit 235, slapped an on-base percentage of 316 because the dude knows how to walk. He got 62 walks last year, although struck out 170 times. So sometimes the eyes may have been good, but the holes in the bat were looking a little like Swiss cheese. And he almost carried a slugging of around 400. He did notch 16 home runs that year and hitting 29 doubles. So although that is very desirable, we do want to see him get on base a little more via the base hit as things move along in the season. Taking a look at things now, Kyle Isbell is going to be one of the center fielders that's going to be breaching and trying to break into this Major League roster yet again. Drew Waters is also going to be a guy that we're going to be noting. The first one that we're going to be talking about, Kyle Isbell, is going to be this guy. Taking a look at his attributes very quickly, he does have a very plus side against the lefties. Again, going to be platooning a lot with our guy Garrett Hampson. Garrett Hampson, again, probably going to be taking the blunt of the right fielding spot for him because Kyle Isbell does have a little bit to work on. We didn't see a whole lot from Isbell, but he did hit 22 doubles out of the 70 hits. That is a very plus sign. Isbell definitely knows how to put it in the gap when he needs to. Not the biggest power guy, but that is okay. We don't need much power because another center fielder here does not have that much power as well, but he is more of a defensive outfielder, and that is in Drew Waters. Waters is going to be trying to swim his way to the Major League roster. However, if it's any signs from what last year was, I don't know how much we're going to want to keep Drew Waters in the major leagues. He might need a little more time down in AAA, in my opinion, because 107 strikeouts over just 69 hits, although that is very nice. We don't want to be seeing more strikeouts than base hits from any player on this team. As we finally wrap things up in the positional depth, we talk about recently acquired right fielder Hunter Renfroe. Super strong arm, as we mentioned before, leading the major leagues, and I believe all of baseball completely in outfield assists. A very strong arm player. He also does have some pop, but he did struggle a little bit last year to really find that home and find some talent there. So we are hoping that Hunter Renfroe can kind of crack things down. As we talk about another player in Nelson Velasquez, this is a guy that has absolute light tower power, if you will. Nelson Velasquez last year only did hit 235, and he did strike out 51 times while only getting 38 hits. But would you believe 38 of those hits were not just base hits, 6 of them being doubles, and 17 of those 38 hits were home runs. Velasquez definitely has that power to be a true threat on the team. One other guy that we do want to mention previously is going to be Daron Blanco, the 30-year-old. Really broke onto the scene last year for the Kansas City Royals. He's hoping to find himself on that spring training roster. And finally, real quick, we're going to wrap it up and just do a quick little overview of the depth chart before we move on to a little more of the meat and potatoes of this episode. We have MJ Melendez in left field, Kyle Isbell in center, Hunter Renfroe in right, where Vinny Pasquantino is going to be the first baseman, followed by Michael Macy in second base. Bobby Witt Jr. is the obvious shortstop, where Michael Garcia is going to find himself at the hot corner, where Nelson Velasquez is going to start things out as the DH, where Salvador Perez and Freddie Fermin are going to be the guys that are going to be behind the backstop this year. Perez is also going to be noted as a DH along the way. As we talked about the bullpen, it is going to consist of players like Will Smith, John Schreibner, Nick Anderson, Daniel Lynch, Chris Stratton, Carlos Hernandez, Jake Brents, Josh Taylor, Alec Marsh, and Jonathan Bolin at the start of spring training. Now, with that being talked about, we did make some acquisitions, and we did end up grabbing Genesis Cabrera from the Toronto Blue Jays. Cabrera is a lefty that I really wanted to have in this rotation. We basically got him for absolute peanuts, as last year was not the best year, but it wasn't a horrible year. We have seen Cabrera in the past post some pretty decent seasons. You see that 2020 season where he posted a 2.42 ERA. He has hovered around that 4-ish ERA in his career. Over 213 innings, he notched a 3.97 ERA, while in 213 innings, striking out 218 batters. Personally, I'm going to take that for just $1.5 million. That seems like a pretty decent flyer to take for what we gave up in the trade. Now, that was not the only player that we got from the Toronto Blue Jays. We also got right-handed pitcher, former starter, former prospect in Nate Pearson. He was recently converted to the relief role a couple years ago by the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, here is the thing with Nate Pearson for us. we are going to be doing something that we are going to title Project Pearson. Now, what is Project Pearson, you may ask? Project Pearson is going to be turning Nate Pearson into a closing pitcher. We do not have a lot of closing pitchers that I am very keen on in that role. We are going to be giving Nate Pearson that opportunity in spring training to show us that he can be that closing pitcher for this staff. Maybe it's the pressure that he needs, maybe it's not, but we are here to find out in spring training if $740,000 closing pitcher Nate Pearson can get the job done. That is definitely something that we want to be talking about. And if you're wondering who we ended up giving up in that trade, it was starting pitcher Daniel Lynch. Daniel Lynch is going to be a Toronto Blue Jay. We were able to get Nate Pearson and Genesis Cabrera for Daniel Lynch. Daniel Lynch, again, not really a guy that we had too high hopes for or too much plans. We have a lot of starting pitchers that were right around that kind of same overall, same plan, and I didn't want to have too many guys being circled in and out, wasting contract options and things like that. He's pretty much going to be a guy that's going to find himself a starting role in Toronto as well. I think he's going to do pretty good for that. As well as we did sign a couple catchers in this one. We did lock up Freddie Fermin to begin the season. We gave him a 2-year contract worth $1.6 million. He's going to be getting paid $800,000 per year. However, that is going to be a backloaded contract. So in reality, Freddie Fermin is going to be getting that same amount of that rookie contract he did in 2024, $740,000. That's going to carry over to 2025. And then the next year is where he's going to finally make a little extra money at $860,000. Still not going to be cracking that $1 million mark, I'm sure, in those arbitration years. However, Freddie Fermin is going to find those contract numbers. Another guy that we did lock up for a couple years, or at least 1 year, is going to be MJ Melendez. We gave him that same treatment, bumped him up $20,000 extra, and threw him a little bit extra cash. That way, we told him it's going to be a depth role, however, because we're not exactly sure what our plans with MJ Melendez is. I'm hoping he can have a big year for us so we can really have a nice young core. Now, talking about a core, this is a guy that I just had to bring back to this roster. He was a free agent pickup, and that is Alberto Mondesi, a B potential 28-year-old, 64 overall shortstop. Mondesi is not going to be starting the season in spring training, and he is not going to be on the major league camp. He is going to be a guy that is going to have to work his way and prove his way back to the major leagues as things move along, because he is a guy that really hasn't proved it too much in the recent years. That we want to see Mondesi be able to kind of come back to life in Kansas City, where another move we did end up firing our pitching coach in Brian Sweeney. He was absolutely dreadful at pretty much everything that he was bringing to the table. He was doing nothing more than dragging the team down as far as attributes go. He was doing a -1 hits per 9, -1 K per 9, -1 to stamina, and a -2 pitching clutch. So if we want Nate Pearson to be successful, that is definitely not the guy that we want on this team. So we decided to make a move and sign Anthony Cisneros, who gives a +1 velocity, +1 hit per 9, +1 home run per 9, and +1 walk per 9. Basically, a total flip of the coin on this one. Anthony Cisneros is a total different pitching coach that I'm hoping can really provide a lot of opportunities. We also did a minor league trade, nothing too crazy, but we did move away from Matt Sauer, who was a Rule 5 pick, and Steven Cruz, two guys that really were on the 40-man roster to start. We had no room for these 56 overall deep potential players, so we ended up grabbing a relief pitcher in Luis de Avila. He is going to be a relief pitcher sitting at 22 years old, and he's a 55 overall himself. I have a lot more hopes that someone like him would be able to crack out a decent season. Also, we added Tyler Duffy to the 40-man roster in hopes that Tyler Duffy can crack the major league roster as well. This move would cause Anthony Venenzio to be removed and designated for assignment. So Anthony Venenzio is going to be the move going forward with the Tyler Duffey move. Another one that we did add to spring training is going to be Kyle Wright. Kyle Wright is going to try to break into the Major League roster. However, talking about some of the pitchers that we talked previously, Chris Bubic is not going to be on that 40-man roster. He is going to start out in AAA and work his way into the major leagues, very similar to Alberto Mondesi. I want these guys to prove themselves at the minor league rosters before they do anything else. First guy that we did decide to send down to the minor leagues through spring training was Austin Nola. There really just wasn't much of a spot for Nola, as we have catching pretty much figured out. A couple other guys that we did end up moving along from. Austin Nola was the one that we did mention previously, and that is definitely one of the guys that we end up sending down. As well, we are going to talk about some of the guys that did very well in spring training. One of those guys being Brady Singer. In 29 innings, struck out 26 batters with an ERA of 1.86, while the whip was standing at a 1.07. Another guy that I do really want to take the time to mention that is going to be cracking the major league rosters is Angel Zerpa. He is only a 63 overall, but I was very impressed with what I seen in spring training. He ended up giving us a 2-to-1 win-to-loss ratio while throwing 24 innings, only struck out 12 batters with a 3.75 ERA, but a very respectful whip at 1.13. He's going to get a chance to start the spring. Now, if you're wondering, why is he the guy that was going to be breaking into this rotation, or into this roster, rather, and not a guy like Kyle Wright? That is because Kyle Wright, given the same amount of opportunities pretty much that Zerpa had, he only pitched 21 innings. Did strike out 22 batters, but that ERA sitting at a 7.71 was just something I was totally not comfortable putting into a major league roster just yet. I think he has time to kind of figure things out. I don't know if the injury is still prolonging him or keeping him from really hitting that full potential, but the whip also at a 1.76. It wasn't that he was just letting up hits. This guy was walking a lot of guys as well. Things were not looking really good. So in that being said, Kyle Wright does get sent down to the minor leagues, along with players like Josh Taylor would get sent down to the minor leagues as well. So the lefty reliever is going to be getting sent down. Unfortunately, Tyler Duffey was another guy that is not going to crack into the major league roster to start, as well as Nick Prado. As we kind of mentioned, Nick wasn't really a guy that we were expecting to break that roster. He's going to be a guy that needs to develop a little more in the minor leagues. Daron Blanco does not make it as well. And talking about it, Nate Pearson did a phenomenal job, actually, as the spring training closer. In 9 innings, he was able to strike out 5 batters and only walk 2, while he did not allow an earned run, and a whip at an insane .67. Although that was only 9 innings in the entire spring training, I did like what I seen. He had a very plus fastball. There were times where he was throwing it 100 miles an hour, where last season I think he was only averaging like 97, 98, I do believe. He does have an average on this game at 99, but it was really nice to see that he was really throwing the ball very good, because as you guys can see, things really weren't going too great for Nate Pearson in his tenure with Toronto. I figured it was time to kind of swap things up, bring him somewhere where he might be able to pitch a little more comfortable. So, taking a look at what the rotation may look like on opening day, we have Brady Singer. He is going to be the opening day starting pitcher. He had a phenomenal spring, as we mentioned before. Following him up is going to be Michael Wacha, the veteran righty, and then the lefty, Cole Reagans, is going to be the middle of this rotation, protected around in between the other righties like Seth Lugo, and Jordan Lyles is also going to be cracking this rotation in the number 5 spot. He is going to be that number 5 starting rotation pitcher. Only really reason being, he did actually have a very phenomenal spring training. I think he pitched like a 1.10 ERA over around 24 innings as well. And also, it is worth mentioning, I wasn't really comfortable leaving $8.5 million just kind of sitting there around in the minor leagues. As we take a look at that roster, We take a look at some of the guys that are hopefuls of the future for this team, talking about guys like Bobby Witt Jr., Salvador Perez, Seth Lugo, and now Freddie Fermin that are all at least going to be on this team for the next 2 years after the 2024 season goes. We also have guys like Michael Wacha and Hunter Renfroe that are going to be hanging around for the 2025 season unless we end up trading them. Now, one thing that I did want to note, I do have the idea of potentially trading Kyle Wright. You guys let me know what you guys think down below. You guys let me know if you think that Kyle Wright is a guy that we could trade, or should I keep Kyle Wright? Now, the thing is with Kyle Wright, yes, he is a higher overall than Jordan Lyles, and Jordan Lyles is definitely prone to digressing. Now, we do have guys like Chris Bubic and Asa Lacy that are very highly talented guys in this Kansas City's organization that could break the major league rosters this year. More than likely, Chris Bubic is probably going to be a guy that is going to be breaking the major league rosters. Asa Lacy might need a little bit more to kind of figure out his entire role, but that is definitely a guy that I'm thinking about trading, and he is not the only one that we're thinking about trading. Nick Pratto could be a guy that be getting shipped this year as well, along the lines as well as Adam Frazier, because of what, like we said before, in Michael Macy. Another guy that we didn't really mention and did not make the 40-man roster is Nate Eaton. Now, if you guys know Kansas City ball, you will know that Nate Eaton did not hit the shit out of the ball last year. He was under, I think, like a 170 with like barely any hits. It's right here in front of your face. I was being generous at telling you that it was a 170 because in 28 games, he had 53 at-bats and only got 4 hits. That was it. 4 hits, only walked 2 times, and struck out 21 times. Now, he did make up for it whenever he did get on base, given he only got on base 6 times, unless he got hit by a pitch or something like that. He was able to swipe 3 bags. He's fast. He's a very good defender. That's something to say, but I don't really think it has a spot on this team. And talking about spots on this team, Garrett Hampson is another one that I'm debating on trading. Now, Garrett Hampson is a very good platoon player. He is very valuable for this team right now. This is not a trade that I'm thinking about doing anytime in the future. However, if we are not performing come the All-Star break, Garrett Hampson could easily be a guy that we could probably get a decent value out of, as well as a guy like Daron Blanco, who is just breaking into his major league career. I just don't really think that he really has a place on this team. I do think that he does have some talent. He does have some potential. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much going to wrap things up. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about the entire 26 rosters, spots, every single person that really ended up on that. But I did want to talk about some of the guys that are traded, some of those guys that did not make the spring training roster. I don't want to kill you guys with an absolutely huge episode. This one is going to be probably nearing around an hour marker. So I do thank you guys all so much for watching today's episode. We are going to be jumping into some Kansas City Royals gameplay very, very shortly. Stay tuned. We are going to be doing a lot of content in the future of this channel, so I do hope you guys do enjoy. And once again, if you guys did enjoy today's video, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for more amazing content, because only you, that is right, only you can make a difference for today's channel, so your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, guys, I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye-bye.